Hi, Sultan. Namaste. Welcome.
Namaste.
Welcome to the community here at Rasayana. We have our newest member, Jessica, here on the call. She's beginning her year-long Clear Mind, Strong Body journey with the Rasayana community today.
Oh,
And
great.
Hi,
she's
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
So she's going to be working with me for the next year, going through my curriculum as you know it. And then Sultan is an Ayurvedic practitioner as well and faculty member at the Maharishi Institute and is very passionate about natural healing and living Ayurveda. And I crossed paths with Sultan here in Colorado Springs shortly after moving here, and we've certainly stayed connected since. So thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so what I told Jessica you'd be talking about today is really the role that Ayurveda can play for us in our relationship to the natural world and how these laws of creation relate to our daily choices in life around health and well-being. And I'm going to let you just have the floor and make you co-host and let you chat for a bit, and maybe we can check in at the end with any questions that you might have.
Yeah, no, of course. Thank you.
Welcome.
So yeah, I mean, Ayurveda really is about this value of natural law on so many levels. And there's a lot of angles we can take to illustrate this. Ayurveda is not an herbal medical science. It's not even really a medical science. Although it deals a lot with medicine and healing and health, Ayurveda itself means the science of life and of lifespan generally, but that really applies to everything in creation. The origin story, so to say, of Ayurveda is quite interesting. Essentially, the creator, when the creator was finished creating creation, Brahma, as he goes by, remembered Ayurveda because creation has been created several times. And as it turns out, Ayurveda is kind of like the blueprint or the software that creation runs on for the vast majority of creation. Ayurveda is actually an incredibly multidimensional science, but how it exists on planet Earth today is an interesting kind of state. We have roughly 1 to 5% of the original literature, and that is the written text. Forget the actual full and total spectrum of the knowledge itself, which can't really be written into text form. But that science is really, again, this cosmic science of life. Again, so by definition, it's not a medical system, it's not an herbal system, it's not a diet and lifestyle and take a nice walk in the early morning kind of system. Although, again, practically speaking, functionally, Ayurveda is a medical system, especially as far as it's taught and practiced today. But regarding the way Ayurveda operates, we don't have to look very far into the literature or into really most schools of Ayurveda before we come across the kind of the dynamic of consciousness. Consciousness is primary. Every Vedic science, Ayurveda being one of many Vedic sciences, every Vedic science deals with consciousness. Yoga is an offshoot of particular aspects of the Vedic tradition. Ayurveda is the science of life and, functionally speaking, a medical science coming from the Vedic tradition. We have Dhanurveda, which is the military and warfare science of the Vedic tradition. We have Gandharva Veda, which is the science of music, or the art rather of music, coming from the Vedic tradition. So this comes from an incredible civilization, the remnants of which we find in many forms across Earth today. But the main theme, or the main kind of pillar of the Vedic civilization and every one of its branches or sciences, is that it deals with consciousness. It focuses on it primarily. It's not an afterthought. It's not, let's get the body in order and then maybe consciousness will fall into place. The absolute primary goal of every Vedic science, especially in its purity, is to develop consciousness. And so again, we don't have to look very much into this science of Ayurveda before we find this value of consciousness, all the way from the purpose of this kind of medicine and that kind of medicine to the very basics of the actual definition of health. The word or the term for health in Ayurveda is swastha, which means to be established in the self, which is a kind of a technical term for an enlightened state of consciousness. And the cause of all disease, according to Ayurveda, and they're very clear about this, literally, the cause of any and all disease is something called pragya aparad, which again, that could be a whole lecture in and of itself. That means the mistake of the intellect. It's essentially a term for unenlightenment. So the cause of all disease, according to Ayurveda, is a lack of a state of enlightenment. And the very definition of health is enlightenment, essentially. And so, again, Ayurveda is not a medical science. Fundamentally, it's the science of creation. It's the science of what it means for life to live and for life to live on, as in lifespan, in all forms. There's Ayurveda for animals, for the plant kingdom, for the gem and mineral kingdom. There is Ayurveda for other life forms in other dimensions. Ayurveda deals with a whole bunch of crazy, very out there scenarios, and the Vedic literature is quite clear about the multidimensional nature of creation, and Ayurveda applies in different forms and ways across creation. But again, bringing it back to something more practical, looking at this value of the laws of nature. So as it turns out, creation is run on a kind of comprehensive or coherent, we could say, system. Meaning creation runs in an orderly fashion. It operates in an orderly fashion. Right now, there's a million laws of nature ensuring that your life is living. Between gravity and the way light reflects off of this and that, all the very, very subtle forces and particles holding your particles together, actually, and ensuring that cellular life can function, all the laws of nature governing metabolism, in your digestive system, but also in every individual cell, in every nerve and all the neurons in the brain,
Really
electromagnetism.
Relationships, right? Relationships from every particle to another, and the kinds of forces that impact those relationships and drive change. Right.
Yeah. And that relationship value is key, because we can find relationships on a subtler or simpler level between cells and specific laws of nature, or the atoms between each other. But again, the goal of Ayurveda ultimately is to tend to that relationship between the depths of your consciousness, meaning the source of your mind in a lot of ways, the kind of thing that allows you to have a mind, your soul in a more Christian or religious term, your consciousness in a more Vedic term, the relationship between that and the spectrum of natural law which governs creation. So we have laws of nature governing kind of more cosmic values, the operation and existence of galaxies and stars and blah, 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 other dimensions and blah, 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 blah. And then we have more local laws of nature, like the wind and the trees and the way the water in oceans interacts with the sky. Those are more, we could say, localized laws of nature. So when I say natural law, it's really referring to the full spectrum of any and all laws of nature governing any and all parts of creation. And as Chris pointed out, it's really about the relationship, because it's wonderful. We can talk all day about how cool it is that creation is operated by an intelligent spectrum of natural law. but how do we relate to that? And how does our digestive system relate to that? How does our digestive system feel about the laws of nature governing the food that we eat? So we have a bunch of canned food, leftover food, and takeout fried fast food. The laws of nature which govern our digestive system might not have the best relationship with the food and the laws of nature involved in whatever you're intaking. Whereas if you are living in the right part of the earth for your genetics, my blood is Egyptian. I grew up in Minnesota. That was a bad call on my parents' part. And I had to go through a lot of 30 plus winters, which is very unnatural for my genetics. But our digestive system will be far happier with the food grown in the parts of this earth where the laws of nature are perhaps more familiar, where there's a relationship that goes back several generations genetically, so to say, with the laws of nature governing, because food that grows in Europe is very, very different from food that grows in Central Asia or South America. And the digestive systems of those that live in those regions, there's actually an expression in Ayurveda that goes, nature will grow in an area the foods and the medicines needed by the people who live there.
Right.
And so we live in a wild time. We're flying all over the place. I just flew somewhere and was eating who knows what from who knows where. And you kind of have to just be on the fly like that in this age. But generally speaking, principally speaking, again, like Chris pointed out nicely, it's about this relationship value. And so
And if I could interject for a moment.
Please, go ahead.
The world that we live in now is very different than the world where Ayurveda was first gained by the Vaidyas, that direct knowledge through meditating. And it, we live in a modern world where we have lost a third of our topsoil with our modern agriculture methods. We have a much different context for how do we find and stay connected to that consciousness. The practices of a modern yogi here today will look very different. And of course, how those practices are applied in our daily habits and practices will depend on our location, our climate, our epigenetics. Now we have people spending tens of thousands of dollars looking into their epigenetics to assess risks for autoimmune disease and this chronic inflammation that is now becoming the standard American life, right?
Right.
Or the standard modern life. It's not even just American, right? And so I just wanted to interject that there as we start to kind of build this funnel, if you will, in our minds of, how do we get from up here, this subtle realm of, Purusha and Prakriti in Samkhya philosophy, and funnel that down to our daily lives here in a pandemic, managing, working from home with different kind of circumstances. And that relationship building is what really will determine our immune strength, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's going to be about you being able to have a clear enough mind so that that crime against your wisdom, your innate intelligence that has already evolved over millennia for you to thrive as an organism, to not let that thought process get impeded, right? To get clouded. And that's what these practices are, Jess. These are lifelong journeys with really no finish line, right? It's like wading into an ocean, and only you decide how far or how deep you want to swim. And there are plenty of islands to stop along the way and rest and nourish yourself, right? Because it really is, I think, about the relationships that we have with our own bodies and physiology, with people in our local communities, the relationship we have with our planet, and then on the next layer, the relationship we kind of have with the universe and the entire cosmos. These are the kind of spheres or sheaths, if you will, of these relationships. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, Sultan, on how these natural laws reflect in our daily lives and how we interact with them, or how we can be more aware of them.
Yeah, no, it's again that relationship value that's so critical here. And as an Ayurvedic practitioner, you know, on one level, we're looking at the condition of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Obviously, there are other factors we're looking into also, like the state of Agni, but Agni is really kind of an expression of the condition of Pitta. These three fundamental doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, they're kind of like, in one sense, the natural laws that govern our body primarily and parts of our mind, although the mind is governed by other subtler forces. And this ability to perceive a person's alignment with natural law is very easy to glean by assessing the condition of the doshas. And so in terms of daily life, in terms of natural law or aligning with the laws of nature in one sense, we can look really quite simply at our overall well-being. That's one very key measure. A general sense of well-being and happiness is absolutely foundational, especially in these times when the world is quite crazy. There's a principle from the Vedas that, generally speaking, whatever it is that you need to progress is within arm's reach. And so, and how do you assess what it is that you need to develop health, develop your personal life, your character, your relationships? The clarity with which you can understand what you need to progress is another matter. But generally speaking, what we need to progress is within arm's reach. And so even in today's crazy world, when we don't really have access to a simpler set of laws of nature, a simpler way of life, so to say, it's still possible. And there are a couple of key things I could highlight for now, because there's a million ways you could approach balancing your three doshas and balancing other values of your individual human mechanism, as I call it. But generally speaking, bliss and happiness. Happiness is quite nice. Bliss is referring to a far richer and more consciousness value. It's not even of happiness, it's just another dimension of experience. And the development of bliss, or ananda in Sanskrit, is crucial to be able not only to deal with life as it is, but to spontaneously be able to, again, grab what is within arm's reach to balance your system. And so this value of developing a state of balance of your system has a lot to do with how aligned our system is with the software running creation. Right. And it's very easy to understand what would be useful for that from the perspective of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And so an experiential understanding, and augmented by an intellectual left brain understanding, but primarily an experiential understanding of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, goes a long, long way. Because if you have Vata type XYZ, Vata type mental conditions like anxiety, Vata type body conditions like constipation, then with that experiential awareness of what Vata is, you'll naturally be attracted to that which balances it, which is essentially opposite values. There's a principle, Samanya and Vishesh. Basically, we're looking at the way in which opposites balance each other. If you have way too much anger, spending time with somebody who's also angry is just going to aggravate the anger. If you're dealing with really weak and dull digestion, and you take a bunch of ice cream that has a similar quality, it's going to continue to weaken it. But conversely, if you're very angry and you spend time with somebody who's very happy, that is somewhat of an opposite quality. And so that balances it. And if we have weak and dull digestion, and instead of ice cream, we have some spiced tea that has opposite qualities to a dull and weak digestion. And again, that's why experiential understanding is more important, because we can understand that we can memorize all the different values of how to balance our inner intelligence. But really knowing it from an experience. Oh, it's cold outside today, so I'm going to have some heating herbs today. Or I'm feeling depressed in the mind today, I'm going to do something that creates excitation in the mind today. It is quite simple intellectually, so you can trust the left brain with a decent amount of study, but experientially is really what's key. And that's one of the values of having an Ayurvedic practitioner in your life, is not just this profound and cosmic perception of the state of existence of your mind-body system, but also the learning that comes from it. Because if you have anxiety and I tell you to take an herb which is calming for the nervous system, to take teas with warming and calming herbs, and to have a diet that has a settling and kind of quite literally an oily effect where it helps to lubricate the innards of the body, then you learn from experience that, oh yeah, there's a flighty, windy nature to my anxiety. And these heavier, earthier substances, whether it's an herb or a food or a location or a friend, seems to have a good effect on that. So again, this relationship value is key. And also in our modern world, it's still very possible to dance and kind of tiptoe through the herds of elephants that are sometimes sleeping or trampling about. It's a wild and chaotic world, but we can dance our way through quite gracefully. It takes just a little bit of knowledge and a good amount of bliss and some perhaps a good amount of experience.
Yeah, I was about to say repetition is the key to that embodied knowledge that you're talking about. Is we're talking about having somatic experience in the body's tissues, in the body's channels, both gross and subtle. And it's really only the amount that you're ready to digest that you'll be able to understand and implement. And it's through that repetition and practice of applying these, really, they are quite simple laws, right? You also get to learn dosage, which is key, especially in any medical application. And so you get to find out what your unique needs are of a particular medicine, because it will be different from another individual, and it will even be different in yourself at another time of year or another stage of your life. So it's only in that repetition that that embodied knowledge lands. And in Ayurveda, it's recommended that you are given a certain amount of information intellectually, and then the teacher expects the student to go and figure it out. Go play with this information, go see what happens, right? And even if you can't find the solution, you're a step closer because you've ruled out something that isn't the solution. And it's in that journey that you continue developing that deeper relationship, not only with substance, but with the consciousness itself that inhabits the substance and within you. So I think that needs some reminding, of that. Even in this curriculum, I can record as many webinars and write as many handouts and workbooks. At the end of the day, it's going to be about what did you actually try, and what did you observe as a result. The Svadhyaya is that branch of the yogic system of self-study and observation. It comes from the same root word as svasta, sva, meaning self, your innate natural state. And that's where I find it's hard for the modern yogi trying to implement these practices in a modern world on their own. Good luck, because it really is living counterculture to the modern world to live an Ayurvedic lifestyle. It's not counter to the universe's laws, because that's how the universe was created. But because as culturally we've gotten so far away from these natural rhythms and laws, it's why we're so sick, right? It really is, in my opinion. We're just so asynchronistic with these laws and rhythms that that dissonance of not being in time and in rhythm with the universe ripples out like a band member out of time, right? The music sounds just a little wonky, like it's off. It's going a little against the grain. And that's why I work with my clients the way I do and bring in other people to create a community, real Sangha, because you need the support. You need people around you doing the same practices. You need people who are declaring the boundary, really, of where do you want to live within? What values do you have? And are you willing to change beliefs if you find information in light or in contrast of that belief? And that's what I hope to start diving in deep with you, Jess, this year, you know, step by step, and sharing some of my personal experiences in this journey, because like I said, it's a lifelong one. You never stop. And even with the number of years experience that I still have ama, I still have my samskar, I still have my patterns, right, karmically, that I'm working through. So I feed off of your support as well.
Yeah, beautiful. And you're absolutely right about this lifelong journey. I just had a session with a client this morning, and I had had a consultation with her sister, and she said, "Oh, my sister had a great experience. She said you were such a master." And I said, "No, I'm really not. I'm a student, and a pretty bad and lazy student, actually, but I'm a student and will remain a student for the rest of my life, because that's just the nature of Vedic science
That's the
is
gig. That's
generally."
what you sign up for. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and I don't mind. I don't have professors grading me anymore, which is quite nice, but I'll remain a student anyways. And this value of karma, you know, you may, and I wish for everybody, the reaching that peak of enlightenment and whatever liberation looks like for you. But this value of karma is really foundational to our experience of health. There's a principle in Jyotish, Vedic astrology, that states that when the karma is over, the medicine comes to you and it works. And so there is no Ayurvedic practitioner that I know of. Actually, maybe one. He's really, really, really good. But even he taught me this. So what can I say? But there's really no doctor anywhere that can overrule the individual karma of the patient,
Right.
unless they are a true master and have that right in nature. But that's a whole nother talk. The karma of the individual is really what determines everything, from their successes to their sufferings, to their happiness, to their pains, to their enlightenment, to their unenlightenment. And so, just as a little tidbit around that, the development of consciousness outside of Ayurveda, Ayurveda helps tremendously to enliven the intelligence of the body and the mind even, and can even contribute sometimes directly, although generally indirectly, to the development of consciousness on a holistic level. But really, truly, your spiritual practice, whatever it is, and when I work with clients, if it's what's right, that's what I'll focus on. What is your religion? If they're atheistic, then we just let it go and focus on other values of consciousness. But if you have a practice, if you have a technique, if you have a spiritual routine that focus like a mental technique, something for developing consciousness directly outside of creating health in the body and mind, the encouragement to continue with that practice is key, because it's one of the few ways we can really accelerate the resolution of karmas. And so most people I know, including myself, who have a spiritual routine or a spiritual technique or set of techniques, most such people could do it a little bit more. They know that they could do it like this. They know they could wake up early and do the pranayama that they learned or the meditation that they learned. And as a practitioner, I've never discounted that as a medical clinical recommendation, because it's foundational. As far as living in alignment with natural law, avocados may be exactly what your Agni, your digestive system, needs. But if your consciousness is still out of harmony with natural law in a significant way, the effectiveness of the balancing influence of the avocado will be less. And so it's like if you are taking all of the herbs for the emotional heart that you have, you take arjuna and rose, and your bed is surrounded with 10 pounds of rose quartz, and you're doing everything for the emotional heart. But every time you go to work, you're just a nasty, controlling, manipulative person to the people around you. You're perpetuating possibly some of the foundational threads of the karma leading to the emotional balance. So the medicine won't work, essentially, or it'll be only as effective as your karma allows. And addressing karma, even Ayurveda actually has some, it's not even Ayurveda, it's Vedic science, the yagya value. There are things we can do to address karma directly, but more powerful than anything, really, is to develop your consciousness through your own spiritual practice, even religious practice. I have clients who are intensely religious, and I say, do your prayers, go to your temples, go to your churches, do the good works. What did Jesus say? You know, be good to the people who don't have money or food, etc. Do that as your practice, whatever it is, it's right for you, and just continue to do that as a recommendation. Of course, not everybody is, that's not always the appropriate course of action as a practitioner, but when it is, it is. And that's just to speak a little bit to that karma value.
And to give people permission who might be curious about what Ayurveda is and how they might be able to start tiptoeing into it. You don't need to be Hindu. You don't need to be a yogi. You don't need to even be a vegetarian to practice Ayurveda. This is a system encompassing all of life. And in Ayurveda, any substance can be medicine, right? And it's about, you know, dosage and who is it appropriate for, and timing. And like you were saying, you know, without the right karmic work done, the medicine's efficacy will be limited. And that's the same. I remember one of my teachers, Dr. Claudia Welch, wrote a book recently about the 4 qualities of the physician, you know, and one of them being flexibility, you know, other than having a strong theoretical knowledge, flexibility in how to deliver the treatment plan for that particular individual. And depending on the relationship between the practitioner and the patient impacts how effectively that medicine will work. So if a client or patient is maybe not feeling as confident in their practitioner, or the relationship has not yet been nurtured long enough for that deep trust to be there, then oftentimes a supplement or an herb or a recommendation made, it won't work, right? Or it'll work, you know, very poorly. And I have seen this happen where it's more the impatience of the student just not yet learning that it's going to take some time of trial and error. I mean, we know this from millennia of trial and error of what works. but it definitely can lead some to think the system of Ayurveda is ineffective, when really it was the missing component of the mindset, of the consciousness, right?
Mhm.
And that's why the Ayurvedic system, being more defined as the medical system, is it's to clear out those shrotamsi, it's to clear out the channels so that prana and shakti can flow. And then we have not only a clear mind, but you have that state of consciousness, which then protects the spiritual pursuit, right? No matter what the faith is of the person practicing, because it will help that person avoid detrimental belief systems and habits and practices,
Mhm.
which is why so many of the practices in at least the Rasayana limb of the Ayurveda system, the rejuvenation and longevity limb, is about how are we playing the long game here, right? Like, how are we going to keep the tissues from their natural degenerative processes? How do we keep that process from accelerating? And when we don't have that flow of Shakti and healing energy flowing unimpeded in the body, that's when we have the disease process begin. You know, um, I find it interesting that how Ayurveda is practiced here is more of the lifestyle preventative measures. It's not yet a licensed profession here in the United States. And so there is still a lot of confusion among the public as to what an Ayurvedic practitioner even means and what kind of training and background is put into that. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how people can maybe begin the process of looking for a practitioner?
Sure. Well, I'm a practitioner, and the thing is, Ayurveda will become a licensable system soon. Chinese medicine went through a similar phase of, oh my God, it's some weird voodoo medicine, and then, oh wait, it's actually a legitimate science with, doctoral level training. And so right now, there are 11, actually, there might be 13 now, states that are called health freedom states. And these are states where the laws are such that, baseline levels of credentials can allow you to practice medicine, essentially. There's a different kind of range of insurance and different kind of legal things you have to be aware of. But essentially, a health freedom state means a person is allowed to make their own decisions about where to get their health advice from. And in these states, an Ayurvedic practitioner, and again, it depends. There are a number of schools, including the school I teach at, where we give out the credentials necessary to practice like that. In those states, a practitioner can practice quite freely. And in the non-health freedom states, you can still practice. The only real restriction is that you can't prescribe herbs. You can give dietary and lifestyle recommendations, and you have to present yourself kind of as a coach. But yeah, in those states, it's a little bit more restricted, but you can do a lot with diet and herbs and life coaching with Ayurveda. So to find one, you would just Google and find a practitioner in your area. A trained Ayurvedic practitioner like Chris or myself can do it over the phone or over video. I see clients in person, of course. There are a number of diagnostic tools we can use. But yeah, there's a range of them out there. There are some far more experienced, some far less experienced. I've found that every Ayurvedic practitioner seems to have their own specialty and their own little magical element. Actually, every healer tends to have their own magic spark, so to say. But Ayurveda is a growing science. There's a huge range of practitioners out there. Some call themselves coaches. Some call themselves doctors, some call themselves whatever, but to really be, skilled in the practice of Ayurveda really does mean something. There is a difference, and I think typically you can find these kinds of practitioners in your area, depending on where you're at.
And there are professional organizations available. I'm a member of the National Ayurvedic Medical Association. There are others as well in the US where you can look in a directory there for a vetted practitioner in your area. And, really at the end of the day, um, you're in control of your health and health choices. So, states that do have health freedom laws, these are really in place, of course, to protect the public, but also to really protect the holistic practitioners from any lawsuit of practicing medicine without a medical license. That was the impetus and kind of the drive for these laws to start being put in place, because holistic practitioners were becoming more in demand as the need for integrative approaches to our health were becoming the norm. They are the norm now. So I really don't know anyone who only sees their MD. They usually got a team of people that they bounce between for various needs. And that's really more the modern landscape that we see, is you have multiple practitioners from different disciplines and modalities working in a collaborative fashion. And the linchpin with that, the three sectors of that, we've got our contemporary modern medicine, and we have our complementary traditional medicine, and then we have self-care, which is really the three kind of hubs. And the linchpins of those three areas are going to be that they're relationship driven, and that they're patient centered, and that the decision making is shared. Those are the components really to integrative medicine. So even if an experienced practitioner like myself or Sultan gives you a recommendation, if it doesn't feel right to you, you know better. You know best, really, right? The context for what works and what doesn't. And you can find a variety of leveled, trained, experienced practitioners out there. And I would say that the bulk of the work to be done in healing using the Vedic system is in the lifestyle and diet. At the end of the day, you can take ashwagandha as a supplement for your nervous system, which now most are familiar with and is pretty readily available at like CVS now, right? Like if you told me 10 years ago you could find ashwagandha at CVS, I would not believe it. But now we can. But if that lifestyle and if the habits and if that openness of the mind or the preparedness of the mind, priming of the mind hasn't been done, then the intelligence of that plant is not maybe going to work 50% of the time. It's really about the concert of the intelligences going on, you as an organism, and then of the substance that you're taking. I'll leave it there for now. I could go on forever about that.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time and just giving us a little taste of, your lens on this huge, vast system of all of life. I mean, really, how do we bundle that up in any webinar series? But I thank you for joining us, Sultan. Anything that you want to add before you sign off?
Bliss and laziness go really well together. And when I say laziness, I don't mean not attending to what's valuable for your health. It's more of a cosmic laziness, because Ayurveda and its principles and its influence on consciousness really require a settled and rested mind, because these are eternal truths. The human body being governed by Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, we're not measuring the biochemistry, which is innumerable field of all sorts of cells and interactions and biochemical. I mean, there's something like 13, I always forget it. If you Google it, it's crazy how many chemical reactions there are in the body every second. And it's like 13 billion or something. It's insane. And it's just a really in-depth field. But Vata, Pitta, Kapha are simple, but they're also incredibly ancient and archaic. And it requires a level of what I like to call laziness, but really a settled consciousness, a settled mind. Because again, the experiential value of these foundational intelligences of the mind-body system, the experiential value is really what goes a long way. So as you experience these things, as you take the ashwagandha, as you take on these practices, really allow your mind to experience it fully and blissfully. Because as it turns out, Vedic knowledge is blissful in nature. It may have to spend some time, like Chris mentioned earlier, going against the grain of conventional thought and conventional society, everything, the structures of the conventional world. And it may take some time to be processed by the brain to understand intellectually this and that. But fundamentally, the experience of really any Vedic truth is blissful in nature. And so we never want to discount that. And when I teach Ayurveda, I'm always sure to encourage that value, because somebody who has every aspect of Vata memorized but has no bliss, I mean, maybe they'll be able to do wonderfully on a test or on a mock case study. But when you put a Vata client in front of them and there's no bliss in them, there's something to say about that. And so we really want to deepen and embed the blissful experience of these truths as much as possible. So that's, I think, what I would like to sign off with.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And hopefully we'll have you back on our campus again soon.
Online campus.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care. Yeah, really nice to get different perspectives of the same philosophy and concepts. I was a little shocked when he said Ayurveda is not really a medical system. I was about to say, whoa, slow
Yeah.
But it really is such a beautiful system, because you can choose which layer you want to work with.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And my goal throughout this time that we have together is to be your cheerleader, to keep you safe, to be your guide, to push you and hold you accountable when you're not doing the work, and maybe make you uncomfortable sometimes too, and have fun. Stay connected to that bliss, as Sultan says, because it's not always blissful. That's the truth. When the body starts that deep cellular repair, it cannot always be comfortable. Right. And true awakenings downright suck. That's the truth. Right? I mean, they're messy. They're messy, because you're really digging in. And I know that anything you share in this space and with this community is confidential and protected and respected as well. And we'll have all kinds of emotions come up in our well-being as we work with these dimensions of wellness. So that might be a good segue to pull out your welcome packet.
Yeah.
And open up to your 8 dimensions of wellness, where I talk about those physical and emotional and mental kind of aspects to our health and well-being. And I'm going to share my screen again with you and put in the, oops, I have so many things open. Let me first capture the link and put it in the chat. So you can grab this and bookmark it. And then from there, you can make a copy of it. It's a Google sheet that's somewhat like a calendar. Well, it is a calendar.
Oh,
And if you click on the October tab, since we're in October.
I hit it a few times here and I need access. So,
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Why don't I share my screen for now and
okay.
you can see mine,
Okay.
and I'll be sure to give you that access
No
before
problem.
the end of
And
the
then when you
call.
go on your email later, you might have 3 emails by me because by mistake I hit the button a couple times.
No worries, no worries. So here is what I use as a nice guide and reminder as I sit down each quarter, and I do this each quarter in the year.
Mhm.
Think about what my next goals are, checking in with these 8 areas. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see the dimensions of wellness. I've grouped them in 2 as they were somewhat related toward one another. In the other months, I gave you a blank field below. So if there's an additional or other aspect to your wellness that maybe you don't think fits quite in with these, you can define your own.
Okay.
And this is to give you a sense of how I actually live on the daily. And this changes, of course, based on the time of year. Some of the activities are seasonally driven.
Mhm.
But you'll see at the top of each day of the week is what my specific activities are for that particular dimension of wellness. So Sundays are a rest day for me. I don't play tennis typically. I don't do any kind of physical work. I just really rest on Sundays. And where I live, I'm fortunate enough to have a hot tub and a pool. So I can go in the tub and
Yeah.
get some nice hydrotherapy.
Yeah. Would you say taking a bath, like a salt bath, is hydrotherapy?
Yes, and a salt bath is in my emotional spiritual
Uh-huh.
category as well. Um, so I'll alternate, I've got my built-in days of rest that you might remember from the 5-day fascia fix, always building in some rest for the tissue. And so the nature of my physical activities varies. Monday's a more chill kind of day for me physically, right? But Tuesdays and Fridays are more of my go down, do the cardio, do the weights, the kettlebells, kind of more routine. And then depending on the season and my hobby, the weekend, right now it's all about skiing, or will be very soon.
Yeah.
And then my generalized kind of practices are starred at the bottom. So for the physical environmental aspect, we've got my whole food seasonal diet, the fact that I do a kitchery cleanse every fall and spring. I include outdoor activities, and these specific supplements are part of my physical aspect of well-being. I take calcium every day with vitamin D and magnesium. I also take ashwagandha and chavanprash, which is a rejuvenative jam, if you will, in Ayurveda. And I more recently, in the last year, started with some Wim Hof techniques, taking some cold showers or cold swims first thing in the morning, which I'm still working on, but is for me works really interestingly. So I'm still playing around with that. And of course, prioritizing my sleep, really getting 8 hours of sleep a day and making sure that I'm shutting down the digital apparatuses, that I am in bed and getting that time met. If you scroll on down to my emotional and spiritual here, I've included some direct links to podcasts that I listen to. So I really like Oprah Winfrey. I grew up watching her show. She was like a surrogate mother to me, and learning emotional health and well-being. And so her podcast, Super Soul Sundays, she has some really interesting guests on that show from all walks of life, and disciplines. So I enjoy that. Monday is a day that I generally won't work with clients. I will keep that day as a day of content creation. Monday is the day of the week for Lord Shiva, the creator of the world. So that's also why I pick that day of the week to do very specific tasks in my work. It's also where I have my mantra practice. I listen to Unlocking Us podcast with Brene Brown, huge fan of hers. I think she's got some great words of wisdom also around leadership and community leading groups, which I really appreciate. My general kind of practices in this aspect are going to be my aromatherapy, my arts expression. I play the violin. I keep good company. I have strong, healthy boundaries. And that's all an important aspect to my emotional wellness and well-being. Also, lots of regular body work myself in pranayama, and here are my Epsom salts on Saturdays as my energetic kind of flush, if you will. I've also, when I do bodywork treatments, have taken to putting a bowl of salt water underneath the massage table when I'm working to similarly energetically keep that space neutral for me. I'm in there all day with people, right? My intellectual occupational, I schedule, again, certain tasks on certain days of the week. My member coaching, I know, is on Tuesdays and Fridays. I'm going to be interacting with you and any alumna or guests. I know that I'm going to be doing more of my physical work, like house call sessions on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And again, kind of spacing this out in my week so my body is never inundated with one particular kind of task. More podcasts here that are more business, entrepreneurial related. I love listening to Kelly Roach's Unstoppable Entrepreneur podcast. She's a former NFL cheerleader who has now become this multi-millionaire CEO with like 5 businesses. And she is just such a firecracker. And I like listening to her. She fires me up when I'm feeling like I'm missing something. Michelle Obama podcast is fairly new, but I'm enjoying her perspectives. And Kate Stillman is another holistic practitioner in the Ayurvedic circles. And she has a really great show Thursdays that she was calling Dharma and Dollars for a period of time. And that talks about wellness pros and how we can use our skill sets in the modern world in an entrepreneurial and of service way. And then, of course, the other aspects to that are I'm a total documentary geek. I am always looking for the next documentary on Netflix. And I'm a huge reader. I grew up where reading 30 minutes a day outside of my schoolwork was the expectation. It was a rule in my house, actually. So I've become a strong reader. And libraries will always still be one of my favorite places to be. And then all my professional memberships, organizations, continuing education, and the like. For my social and multicultural realm, I just joined my local Hispanic Chamber of Commerce here in Colorado Springs. So I've been meeting a lot of other business owners of Latin descent. It feels good to practice my Spanish, which is not my first language, but a language I'm proficient and literate in. And so it's nice to keep that alive here, which is a uniquely new experience for me as compared to living in New England and in the Boston area. I think that the Chicano influence here is very strong in the history of this part of the land. And so I feel like there's a lot more visible representation on the daily life than I certainly saw in Boston. So I like going down several blocks of my streets and seeing Latin names one after another, one after another, one after another is really nice. So that's part of my digesting my experience around here and seeing that integration with more of the Hispanic culture and daily life. And then my hobbies, I'm active in a lot of meetup groups and Facebook groups, and my hobbies are not all about wellness and Zen meditation. I'm a very aggressive tennis player. I love dancing Latin dance in the ballroom floor, and other hobbies are similar to those contemplative mind body practices like archery, like billiards, some of those other kind of motor skills, if you will. And so this is a glimpse of, what I look at from time to time and modify and tweak depending on what's coming up, what kind of commitments I have, what kind of time I have if I'm traveling. And so I left only October filled in with my info as an example. And once I give you permission, you should be able to go in and you'll see at the bottom here each month. If you want to go in and label, the days as a true calendar and start planning your self-care and practices, you're certainly welcome to do that. I purposely left them blank so you could decide how you wanted to use it. And what I'd like you to do, actually, why don't I do this? Because we have a few more minutes. I'm going to have you pull out a pen, and we're going to do a little bit of writing about a time that you remember feeling really good. I mean, really good, when you felt on your game, right? On your A game. Mm-hmm. I want you to think back to a time that might have been a long time ago for someone. I was thinking about that today. How long? When did I really feel good? I'm talking high vibration living. And once you think you know when a time like that was, I want you to go there in your mind and really think about what you were doing, who you were with. What sights or sounds you were experiencing, and even emotions or feelings that you associate with that memory. And you can jot down on your paper what that memory is, who you were with. Maybe what time of year it was. The activities you were doing. Care to share what you reflected on?
Sure. What I remembered, it's actually I had a little glimpse of it today or yesterday, so it's amazing. When you asked, I didn't immediately make the connection, and then I realized I was just remembering a trip I took to Costa Rica, I think, from like 3 or 4 years ago now, to Blue Spirit. I'm not sure if you've heard of it or been there, but it's a retreat center. Omega in New York State has a connection to them too, and they offer workshops there. and I went for like a 2-week energy healing practitioner workshop that had been recommended to me from a body worker, and on a different trip down there. And when I got down there, my state of being was probably not too different than it is right now. But I was there for 2 weeks. So by over the hump, I was going through my process and stuff, but over like the halfway hump, I started to just really sink in to this like totally different state of being. And so when I think back to that, I think about the sea and going for swims and seeing sunsets. And I think about how physically active I was too, because there's a really tall hill from where I slept to like where I needed to go for classes. So every day I was physically active. The food there is unbelievable. Like you just look at it and you can like feel it, the energy of it and the colors and all the smoothies and juices. Like there's turmeric growing on the side of the hill. There's algae right in the sea. Like what we were talking about tonight about, being right there of the season and of the landscape. Like it was, it's like when I describe it, it sounds like paradise, and it was, but then it was also doing all that energy work and being around people. And at first, I felt like an outsider because everyone knew each other already. And most folks were from Vancouver, so I felt like a total outsider. And then I got over that hump and started making some connections with people. And then by the end, I just felt part of a community. And since that community hasn't stayed part of my life, but in that period, I felt so connected to others.
Right.
And
Connection was deep. So even if you were to cross paths with an individual from that community, chances are you would immediately feel that same tie.
Yeah.
Kripalu was the same way for me, that, over the years I've gone there for different variations of length, different levels of commitment, of training and study and practice. And now it just reopened in August.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
I believe now they are open just to R&R. They're not yet. I believe it won't be until January or February of 2022 before some programs and experts start visiting. But just knowing that the campus was reopened again, and knowing that anytime I connect with one of my people from there, from any of the years, it feels that connection still very much feels alive. So I'm curious if the list that you've been building since our one-on-one includes people from this memory, or?
No, not from, I actually, when I first went to Blue Spirit, there was a friend who I made at that. It was also an energy healing workshop. It was through Donna Eden. It was like a 5-day. And there's a friend I made also from Canada there who is on the list.
Great.
And she actually sent me this beautiful tarot card deck out of nowhere the other day. And it felt really affirming.
How kismet, for that
exactly
right now.
Exactly, because I put her on the list because I thought, even though we talk so rarely, we have such a deep soul connection. And that's so important. So, but the thing, we have a lot of time together, so we'll get to this, but I think I should journal a little, and maybe next time we connect. I think when I saw your manifesto, I actually thought, gosh, this is so telling for me, because it shows in a spreadsheet how out of balance I am. Because when I go to do this, there's whole reserves I need to build up in these different dimensions of myself.
Exactly. And being a Pitta dominant person, I can really appreciate data, right?
Yeah.
That just makes my heart sing. So, and you can't change what you don't track. Like, you don't know what you're dealing with, right?
Great.
And so that's why a lot of the workbooks will have logs and, different kind of inputs for you that are just suggestions, to say, okay, let's get a snapshot and let's really look at what we're working with.
Yeah.
would like you to, after our call tonight, between now and Tuesday,
Yeah.
we, that you continue to kind of build out that memory, and more specifically identify and select the constituents of the memory that you want to bring into this first pass of your clear mind, strong body, right?
Okay.
We've already started with the list making and identifying who your champions are.
Mhm.
That certainly will go maybe under your emotional well-being, right? Having that support system, so that you've already got one input to put on your calendar there. You've got your list.
Mhm.
And other components that I'm referring to would be like the food, right? You said the food was even just beautiful to look at, right?
Yeah.
And that aspect of feeding all the senses,
Yeah.
the sense organs. And we actually spend a whole module on just the sense organs. And so it is a system of living for the sensual and for someone that loves the sensual, right? So as you reflect and build out that memory, think of those kinds of components that you can pull, and maybe just keep more on the front burner as you complete your manifesto, or you think about the kinds of tasks or time management for just between now and through January, like from now to the holidays. That's your quarter. And input on your calendar. I did change the access and put a second link in the chat, so make sure you can, in fact, open that and move it around. You can build out your manifesto just for this quarter. Don't try and do the whole year. It'll be too much. But just fill it out even for the month of October.
Okay.
And start there. You can start plugging in the things you're already doing, and that might help identify where some of the gaps are. And if those gaps are consistent with the memory you're trying to continue to,
They're not.
right?
I
I
have a
mean,
little work to do.
some will be, some will be though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some are just like hack attempts to try and connect at some aspect of it, right? I mean, that's the beauty of it is,
Yeah. No, I just looked. I have some stones, at least. One of the things that I wrote down is I have some by my computer. This is a labradorite.
oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and I have a rose quartz. So that's something that I have been doing a pretty good job of, is like, because I actually wrote in my list, make of Costa Rica, the rocks that I would collect every day. So that's actually affirming to think, yeah, I still, even because right now in my cycle of like that top peak experience I was just journaling about, to like when I'm just at my end of my rope, I'm pretty at the end of my rope right now. So
Yeah.
the beginning of this class is just I really heard like the medicines here, and I feel grateful. I feel like that's good karma that it's coming at this time, because I really feel like I'm ready and need it.
Yeah, they say when the student is ready, the teacher
Exactly.
is, right? And that's the truth. That's the truth. So take a peek at that link now, and then I'd like to pick a new time for our Tuesday, Friday calls.
Great.
And then we can wrap up the evening. I know I'm 2 hours behind you, so
you
might like to have a little time to do your evening wine. And I'll just open up my calendar here.
And Chris, I can open that doc, but I did just request edit access because it's in view only.
Okay, perfect. So thanks.
So do you want me, just because I know it's Chris's Healing Manifesto, should I make a copy to make mine?
Exactly.
Yeah. Perfect. Yep. Okay. All right. So calendar.
And let me do this. I think you're in my book. Yep, because you have a Gmail.
So if you need, because it's so short notice, to meet at 12:30 this coming Tuesday, I can switch my meeting and do that.
Let me take a look. Let me
Okay.
open up here. My preference would be to begin earlier in time.
Okay.
And so at 10:30 a.m. my time and mountain time is when I have us starting now, which is 12:30 your time.
Yeah.
So what would be helpful to you? Would it be helpful to have our call at 9 a.m. my time, 11 o'clock yours, and have you off of our time by noon so you can transition to your next commitment? I also
Yeah.
want to think about, your managing your lunch and having
Mhm.
ample time mid-afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on my end, I was gonna say, but I hear mornings preferable on yours, afternoons preferable on mine. Like starting at like 3 my time, but it doesn't sound like that works for you. So
Yeah,
that
it really won't, because I'm also a different time zone. Um,
yeah.
so what I'd
So
like to do then is let's try 9 a.m.,
okay, so that's 9 a.m. your time.
11 o'clock your time,
Okay.
on Tuesday.
Okay.
And let's just try that for a week or two. And if it's not working, maybe we can revisit it. But morning would be better. Usually after our calls, I'm off to another something I'm teaching. So
Yeah, I hear that. Okay, so that's great, and thank you for making that adjustment. So it
yeah,
goes.
sure. I'll make the change, and it shouldn't change the link to join. I'm just literally going to reschedule that meeting on Zoom,
Okay.
change the time. But if it does for some reason, I'll make sure that gets in your notifications.
Okay, so that'll be Tuesdays and Fridays.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
All
you.
right. You're
Well,
welcome.
that's going to work perfect next week, and then I'll just look because some of my meetings book in advance, and I'll
I'm
send you
sure.
a note if
We'll
there's.
work. Yeah, we'll work
Okay.
around it. We'll be seeing a lot of each other. So
Well,
we'll have
okay.
plenty of time.
Thanks,
All right.
Chris. I hope
You're
you have a great
welcome.
weekend.
Enjoy the evening.
You
Good
too.
night.
Bye bye.